This is our trip to Vermont to see the fall colors and to explore the countryside. We flew into Boston, overnighted at an inn in Cohasset, Massachusetts, which is a seaside village some 20 miles south of Boston. Captain John Smith is said to have landed here in the year 1614. For nearly 2 centuries, the town was a fishing and farming community. This is Cohasset Harbor as viewed from the inn. There are many beautiful homes along a very picturesque shoreline. In the center of the sleepy village is this common, and it has churches, city and government buildings around it. This is, by the way, a town of about 7,000. The main purpose of our being in this area was to enable Lois to make good use of our visa at a Talbot's main discount sales store in the nearby town of Hingham. I promised I'd not video tape what she bought, but all I can say is that I'm sure glad that our rental car had a big trunk. From here we drove to Lexington and on to Concord via the Minuteman National Historical Park, which commemorates the battle that began the War for Independence. We visited this museum in Concord, which contains 15 period rooms dating from the 1640s to the 1880s. From here we went to Sturbridge and stayed 2 nights in the public house, which was built in the year 1771. It's an inn on spacious landscape grounds. There are not many rooms in the historic inn. We had one. It had been remodeled and had a 4-poster bed and a pull-chain toilet. It was located above one of the main 6 dining rooms. We found the food and the service to be outstanding. This is an antique store adjacent to the inn. It was all decorated, as you can see, for Halloween. Boo! This is across the street from the inn. It's a common with a number of houses. From there, we went to Sturbridge Village, which is a recreated farming village of the 1830s.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you this
Nice
morning?
to have you with us on TV with us.
That's all I need for the morning.
Yeah.
Had I known, I think I would have stayed home.
Oh, not exhibit.
We started our tour by viewing an exhibit in the Visitors Center on how they constructed houses in the early days. It was extremely interesting. These were the windows. Look at the intricate molding. Similar to what we have today, but boy, when you think of the tools they had. This, of course, is an early door. Lots of mortising, and again, intricate designs. Another door that was used then, and it looks like the same kind we have today. This is a door trim. This is early lath that was used to hold the plaster in. You'll notice they split logs. It's far different than what we're used to seeing in some of the older houses here, where they use this individual slats. This is one of the early tools that was used to make corner molding. And here's a collection of block planes. And since Jennifer and Bob are just starting off on building their house, this we thought was interesting. It showed what the cost of the houses was then. Pretty large house. And it says that the timber off the farm was $319, bricks $120, stone $55, nail and screws $89, paint and glass $249. Then jumping down to the labor, the mason's cost was $219, carpentry $596, lathing and plastering $68, painting was $38 for a total of $2,376.76. Now a little smaller home, as you can see here, it ran $1,009.28. How do you like that, Bob and Jennifer, for pricing? This is a setup that they used to make the sash around windows. There's the plane, and the other held the wood. This, of course, is a drill and a hammer and some squares. They did use them in those days. And some saws. Now we're on the outside of the visitor center, ready to relive the 1830s by viewing the landscape recreated with restored buildings brought in from all parts of New England. How about that wall? No mortar, just good fits. This is inside a Quaker meeting house. It served as a place for the Quakers to worship on Sundays, to hold lectures, etc. during the week. The Quakers, by the way, were but a small minority in the New England rural communities. Look at the austerity of this establishment. It's very quiet in here, too. This is the outside of the meeting house. We are now at one end of the village common. Dominating the common is the center meeting house, used for worship and town meetings. You'll notice this column was a build-up of a number of pieces of wood, and which were rounded. As shown here, this Baptist church was built in 1832 and restored in 1947. Every Sunday, worshipers came to the meeting house for lengthy sermons. This is a view looking forward in the church. Now let's listen to one of the costumed interpreters tell us about the church.
Of the pews in the front being the more expensive.
Oh, they rent it.
Mm-hmm.
How much would they rent them?
Well, the ones in the front could range anywhere from $150 to as much as $300 a year.
Okay.
It's going to vary because there are going to be different people bidding on them at this pew auction that happens once a year. And then
Every year then they could choose?
yeah, sometimes every year. A lot of the time, or some of the time, you'd find some churches actually, you're buying your pew outright and it was yours throughout your entire life.
Mm-hmm.
You might sell it yourself if you moved away, pass it down to your family in a will, things like that. You
Did
go
they-
towards the back of the church and there's going to be a decrease in price, and there's always the cheap, inexpensive seats upstairs. And most likely some seating room that's free and also standing room that's free.
She told us that the pew renters furnished pads and footstools, and as such they could decorate them as they please. Notice the armrest? We were also told that they took no collection. However, they did receive some support from the government. There's a spittoon in that pew. Now we're outside the center meeting hall, facing the common, which is the heart of the village.
And now we'll visit some of the other places. It's right adjacent to the...
At the side of the center meeting hall is the cemetery. Now let's visit the store.
Morning.
Morning. They would conform to a child's foot.
Oh,
They're very stretchable, pliable.
yeah, I guess even those white ones look
There's
okay
a man's
now.
dress shoes here. There's the ladies' dress shoes.
In a way, they almost look more comfortable than what we wear nowadays.
Well, they're put together and they're made out of good leather, and they're very pliable. Pretty much different than what we'd have today, actually.
Are these toothbrushes?
Those are called teeth brushes.
Teeth brushes.
Yep. Made out of the very finest eastern boar bristle. These are otter and Sheffield steel.
Country store. Pardon? A country store.
What's the date of the store?
So there's several dates, sir. He started, that little room here, over there, he started business in 1826. The room you were in is 1838.
1838. Oh. Thank you. We're in the back room of the store, and you'll note the shipping container for the dishes. Straw is a good protector. This is outside the store. Right adjacent to the store is a shoemaker. So let's go in and talk to the shoemaker at the shoe store.
Wax.
And on the tips, there's one that's hanging onto the rope there in the fourth position. On the tip of what I'm actually using to guide the thread through our pig hairs. And they can still attach to that if you like to see it. You have one on both ends. And you're sewing with what they call the French double running stitch. You go through every hole twice. Needle attaching each other.
Manufacturing.
That's right.
How many shoes would you make in a day, say?
It depends on what type you're making. If you're making them with pegs, you might be able to make 3 pair in a day. If you're stitching them the way I am, you'll make a pair and a half a day.
And how much would they cost?
That's something that you would go to the storekeeper to find out. What I'm going to be paid is if I'm making this type of shoe, I'm going to get approximately 30 cents a shoe.
Okay.
And that would be less than that if I were making peg shoes. No matter what type of shoe you're making, by the end of the day, you can make somewhere between 85 to 90 to $1 a day. When you go to the store to buy shoes, they're going to be costing you anywhere from 75 cents to about $2. And from that point on, if you get involved in boots, you can get on going up to $15. And if you're working on your first job, after 70 hours of work, you get paid around $3. So shoes were very expensive. And that's one of the problems that we have with the museum, that we don't have 15. I think we have 3. Fill an order for a wholesaler in a place like Boston, and he wants to get that order done as quickly as possible.
Now let's wander over to the district school. This is inside. Let's just take a peek.
You would be given passages to memorize, and you would be called forward to recite them. Does anybody know what recite means? Yes? You stand up and you repeat out loud what you have memorized. For instance, if you have...
Well, that sure sounded interesting. We'll come back to this in a few minutes, but first let's go over to the pottery shop.
So I just wiped the dust off of this old pot here, and I'm going to dip it into the coating. But they didn't care, back then, the price of iron, they didn't even want to spend money for iron to put in the glaze. They just leave it clear. Very cheap, frugal folks.
How much would the finished product go for?
Usually it depends on the size of the pot. Little pots, 2 cents, bigger ones, maybe 30 cents. So that's when, as a kid, you could work all day for a nickel. Or as an adult, maybe you'd get 80 cents a day.
Now let's go back to the schoolhouse. Well, we're in there. We're in the back row. Take a look at these desks. They've sure been carved on, and they're actually out of one of the old schoolhouses. We understand town maintained from 6 to a dozen ungraded district schools. So let's listen to our teacher.
When some other people come, we'll let them in. They're late for school. Anyway, the town of Sturbridge had 13 of these district schools, and this would be maybe typical of one of them. However, in a well-to-do area of town, they might have a brick schoolhouse with 2 rooms. Come right in and sit over on this side. Right? And it's a free, well, it's a tax-supported public school system called the Common School. You get a common education here, learning the 3 R's, except that arithmetic was called ciphering, and you wouldn't get it until you were about maybe 12 years old. You got arithmetic a lot later than you get now. Now the ages ranged from 4 years old to 16 years old usually, and they were all in the same room. However, the boys would be on one side, the girls on the other. The teacher would seat them. So they would be all studying different books. The teachers would have to classify them according to what materials they had brought from home. So, for instance, one young man here might have one spelling class, another reading class, another arithmetic, might possibly have an English grammar. So he'd have 4 separate classes that he'd be put into. And they'd be called on in turn to come forward and recite. I wouldn't have any more than a district school education myself, and I wouldn't be expected to teach much of anything. I would just be able to pick out passages for you to memorize. Then you'd have to come forward and recite, and I would have to know enough to correct you and then set you to work at something else. So that's the way schooling was done, and they only had it in the summer and in the winter. In the spring, it was planting. In the winter, in the fall, the children were expected to do the harvesting. If you come, where's your leader? Wait for your leader, please. This is a bucket of water that you'd be given on your recesses in mid-morning and mid-afternoon. The leader, you can come in. If you'd like to come in and sit right over to my left, just let the leader go in first and you follow her, all right? Right there? That's good. I'll try to continue with my discourse. You sit right over there. I think teaching school, or keeping school as it was called, back then might have been a little bit the way it is today. A lot of chaos and confusion. It's difficult for the teacher to keep in mind on what she's doing. However, they had women teaching a lot in this. Let's be quiet, please. It's difficult. This was, they had women teaching in the summertime and they had men teaching in the wintertime, pretty much. That's not an absolute rule, but they found out women were cheaper. They got about half or a third what a man did. So that was very thrifty. They also had, sometimes a poorer district would have a flimsy sheet iron stove like that. That was made in a tin shop. And it's kind of a temporary stove until they find one that, an artifact of the period. But that would be used in a poorer district school. Some of the schools were very, very flimsy. So let's have questions here. I think I'm getting a bit confused with my discourse.
The 4 and the 16 stay in the same room.
Well, that was the way they did it back then. They had a school for every district in a town. I mean, consider that you've got to walk to school. Not too many people even had horses. And certainly no farmer is going to get up at the crack of dawn and gather up children on a wagon and take them to school because they're too busy with their work. So you had to walk to school. So you would come to the one in your district, and that's the way it was done until up until about the 20th century. They were all kind of in the same room together, all ages. There are no grades yet at this period, so you're in with a lot of other children. They're called scholars, and you're all kind of studying something else. Yes, ma'am?
What was the average pay for a teacher?
Well, a woman might get $5 or $6 a month. A man might get 18 or so.
A month?
Yeah, a month. A man could earn more as a farmhand than as a school teacher. But school teachers were young people. They kept school. They didn't really teach. They just had a common school education and were intelligent enough to listen to recitations, to pick out things for them to study, and then they memorize them and come forward. That's why there are no desks here in the front. This is the recitation area here. You've heard of spelling bees? Well, they had spelling bees. This is the spelling parade around here. When they say classes, go to the head of the class. A teacher would have, well, maybe 5 scholars. One would be the head of the class, one would be the foot of the class. You know, they were classified according to their learning level. But they weren't necessarily in the same age group at all.
Now let's go on down a country road. There's a farm down here. It's a typical New England farm of 70 acres or so. And across from the farm, as you'll notice, through the trees is a covered bridge. This, by the way, is, as you know, a chicken. But they're certainly differently marked than those that I have seen. Let's go on in the farmhouse now. I understand that they are doing something with pumpkin.
What are you going to do with it?
Eat it eventually. It's not decoration. It's drying food for preservation. We need it in any form we can get it, either kept whole in there or boiled down into a mash made into a leather or dried in chunks. Just every speck of it will be saved that wasn't going bad. When the, yes.
Pretty tough when it's dried like
It's
that.
quite leathery, yes. When it's dried, it's quite leathery. And you can store them in boxes. You know those round storage boxes? We store a lot of dry storage in those. So we
Is
will
much
have
flavor to it when it's dried like that?
Oh, no. No, not at all. Just take it off the string and put it in the box. You have to be careful that, you know, when you have a particular amount of humidity, that they might mildew.
Yeah.
So that's the time to watch them, turn them. After a while, they can have a tendency, if you don't watch, they might get buggy on occasion. But, other than that, they store well.
Oh, that's good.
What are you making?
I'm making muffatees, fingerless mittens, and I'll show you what they look like. I'm doing this one here. But this one, basically, I'm going to sew from here to here, a little bit shorter, and this one here a little bit longer. So now my fingers are able to do all the work. Making some more muffatees, or spinning some wool, or perhaps I would give to my children to go to school. Maybe in December, this is when we start school here, in December, and to do some writing with his slate pencil and to do penmanship and things like that. So this is what it is. And I'd be writing to my son out in Ohio, because it's getting kind of dark, perhaps around 4 o'clock, so I moved myself to the window for some light. Because when I move myself away from the window, it's kind of cold. Any questions from anybody that'd like to ask?
Well, now to the cellar. You can see we sure did this house from top to bottom. There's some more of those chickens. Now let's go into the barn and hear what the man has to say.
Did I hear you say, is that rye or?
Rye, R-Y-E.
R-Y-E.
Yeah.
And they just store it?
We're storing it now until the winter, and once we get some slow time, we'll thrash it out here on the barn floor.
Oh, I see.
And then the straw will be used for bedding, and grain will be used for making bread.
There's a view looking out the back of the barn. And look at the plowed field. What is this we have coming?
Yeah.
As you can see him plowing there.
Come on. Come on. All the way. Come on. Move. All right.
He was just mentioning, I asked him about how long it would take you to do a piece of property like this. He said as long as it would take, about an acre to acre and a half.
About 8 hours work in this little piece here.
We were told that in the 1830s, agriculture was still the basis of life for most New England families, who worked together in the household and fields to raise crops and livestock for food and to produce a surplus for trade. Now let's go on over to the cooper shop. That's where they make staved containers such as barrels and pails, and it was one of the woodworking skills which many farmers practiced part-time. So let's hear what they have to say.
The bladel of wood. That's what they were telling me.
That's quite an art, making a barrel, isn't it?
No, it's a trade. It's a job that, just about anybody can be trained for. It's not something that you pick up as a means of expression. It's just making a container. Like any other job, you can do it well or you can't do it well.
Do you have to soak those then after you've...
Oh, no, definitely not. Definitely not.
So those are
The container
watertight.
is tight when it's made.
That's the sign of a good product.
Yep. In breweries, what they were doing was called blowing off barrels. After the barrel was made, they'd pump it full of compressed air. And they'd check to see if it would hold pressure. And long before they ever got it wet.
What kind of wood do you use?
A lot of different woods. I'm making this pail out of white pine. It doesn't weigh very much, so it won't be very heavy to carry around.
Mostly pine wood.
Well, if you're making it for pails, if you're making a cider barrel, you'd use white oak, which is flavorless and airtight. It's heavy though, so you wouldn't want to carry a lot of that around, but a barrel you're not carrying around. It's sitting in your cellar, and you need to move it. It's got a head, an end on both ends, so that you can roll where you need it to go.
You can see the method that he uses to hold that barrel.
Now we're on our way over to the Bixby house, which was the home of a blacksmith family. Look at the inside well. It was relatively uninfluenced by city and center village fashions, although there was some pretty nice things in that house. And from there we went over to the blacksmith shop. It was closed, but we peeked in the window and took a look at some of the inside tools. From there, we went to a carding mill. This is where the wool is turned into yarn. This is the way they mechanized the cloth-making process in the 1820s. This is one of the machines.
Put your hand in some kind of high alkali detergent, like pearl ash, lye soap, something like that. Driving a leather belt
Now we're at the rear of the carding mill, and you can see how it was mechanized. You see this water is flowing from a tub wheel and belt drive. And this really reflected early 19th century improvements in water power technology. Listen to it. This roar diminishes and the stream flows into a beautiful meadow. This now is a grist mill. Mills like this grind rye and corn into meal and feed. To power all these mills and a sawmill, which you'll see in a few minutes, is this pond. What a gorgeous day. What a gorgeous place. This is a sawmill. Let's go on inside.
Saw marks because they use a straight saw, but the marks aren't always exactly parallel. It's about 10 minutes or so. In the 1830s, they would run it about 2 or 3 feet per minute, and they could probably saw through that in about, 5 minutes or so.
This is another view of the sawmill. As you can see, it is not working right now. They've diverted the water from it to the other mills. It'll be running in the afternoon. This music will carry us through where I changed the battery and somehow or another slipped a little in my recordings here. So here we are, back looking at the flowers. We're now on the common, and you can see the horse and buggies that take you around. This is in a tin shop. Listen to him here.
Man down there for free. Get it right down to the blacksmith shop if the youngsters would like it.
Just insert the wire in that
Just tell them I sent you down.
Finish it off, like just tapping. Very slow, but it can be done. What I'm doing now is rolling the edges.
This is a parsonage, 18th century. Let's go on in. What with this parsonage?
This would be the congregation. I mean, what of it?
Yeah, sure.
Congregational ministry's office, where he lived with his family. He'd be preaching his sermons in the big white meeting house at the end of the common. This is the very best room in the house. The best place for entertaining and receiving visitors. The parlor. And there would be an awful lot of entertaining. Yes, tremendous amount. Which would be a drain on the budget.
Yes.
So this would be the bedroom.
This is the bedroom of the minister's wife, correct?
And you're the minister.
Yes, ma'am.
How big would the congregation be?
Oh, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. As a matter of fact, at best, from the real town of Sturbridge, we only had an average. And how valid the average was, I think some people might have said that maybe 15 or 20% of the people might have been Congregationalists. But that's not a valid figure.
Yeah, this is
If
all
you wanted to be up to date, you'd have wallpaper, because wallpaper was being produced in this country by 1830, 1835.
This is the upstairs bedroom. This is the downstairs bedroom. This is a law office. Let's go inside here.
Much proportionally, then as you do now, or?
Probably, because it won't take writing a will, maybe $1.50. Why do you laugh? The relationship is 50 to 1.
That's right.
From then to now.
That's about right.
You're paying $75 today? Oh, maybe that's somewhere near right.
Yeah, they charge about $7.50 a minute now, I think.
Here we are back on the Common, which again is the heart of every early 19th century New England community. In other words, it's the center of the village. And now we're going to go to the Fennell House, which is a 18th century house that's a widow's house. We are.
No, it depends on so much, right. And you see here, instead of a milliner's shop, we're showing women who are working in their homes.
Oh,
So
they
what
made
they're-
their own?
Well, they're making them not only for themselves, but for other women in the village.
Oh.
And not only bonnet making, but they're acting as seamstresses, make a slipcover. If you came here and needed help making something, you might want a fancy new ball gown, and you're not sure of how to cut it out, they can help you with that. You might, because people are used to dealing that way. You might have an account at the store, and the storekeeper has a lot of bookkeeping to keep track of, because he gets goods from other people who sometimes apply it to someone else's account if they owe them money.
And then we remember it.
Yeah.
Turks, turban, squash.
Well, we just learned something. It's out here, and everybody's been asking about it.
Oh,
They
that-
look like pumpkins to me. Yeah. Turks, turban, squash. Well, I never heard that before. You learn something new every time you come in. Turks,
One's right there.
Yeah, write it on here, and then we'll remember it. Turks, can you spell it?
Turk's turban squash.
Turk.
Now we're in the back room of the home, and now we're outside, and that's the privy. And take a look, there's even a one-holer for a little child. This is the backyard. And from here, we're going next door to the Finch House, which is furnished as the home of a country printer's family. It was said to have been started in the early 18th century, and it has additions dating back into the 1820s.
Made out of pig fat and lye. West Indies gherkins. They're a type of cucumber. We use them for pickling.
And now we'll go on over to the bank. Here we are inside the bank. That's quite a stove there. There he is, the man.
Reason for it. That would be good thing to be the bank in the town, right?
Next to the bank is a store. We'll go on inside. This is a store where they make a number of products to sell. We bought a trivet there, one of those trivets hanging right there. This handsome federal-style dwelling and its setting reflect the domestic life and some of the agricultural activities of a prosperous farmer's household. There's another view of the house. The family members would have been among the community's leaders. Let's go inside.
This house was built in 1796 in Charlton, Mass. for Salem Town Senior. Salem Town was a farmer, he was a well-to-do farmer, always experimenting to get better products, so by the time he was 50, he could afford the house.
The interpreter told us that at the time there were 13 people living in this house. This, of course, is the sitting room. And if you haven't already guessed, here we are walking. You can see our feet. Lois is always in front of me. There's my a size 9.5. It's the only picture you'll see of me. Now we're in the living room. An elegant room. Beautiful, beautiful molding. By the way, this house is being shown as it would be in the 1730 period. Very large rooms, and of course this is the dining room. Now, as you can see, we're going upstairs. This, of course, is the main bedroom. And what a neat place for a little one. Notice all the material and the way they made all the bedspreads and the walls. Very interesting. There was painted trees. Now here's a lady telling us about it.
Say we're doing home swim, but if you're doing that, you're generally not making enough. I was just figuring, because I'm going to make one of these beds like that for my daughter. And I was just figuring in my head it's going to take at least 25 yards of material. Now, you're not going to weave on your home loom 25 yards of material for a bed when you have to weave, you know, clothing for your family, toweling for your kitchen. You know, I'm talking 1700s. By the 1830s, you can go to the store and you can buy your clothes, this material for your dress. You can buy your toweling.
This is on the ceiling.
You know, have dances and parties. Take the doors down. You have your big ballroom, put the doors up. You have 2 bed chambers. He was a mason also. And they didn't have a place to meet, so he said they could meet in the ballroom, and these are all Masonic symbols. They are supposed to be the tall cedars of Lebanon, and we use something with the masons. And what's on the seat, those are all original.
Here's one of the bedrooms. All the rooms were very large. Notice the wallpaper. Now we're in the kitchen area. Notice that stove, what a cutie. Here we are, listen to this lady tell us about what's going on in this time.
In the apple mixture, which is kind of like a, mostly like a chunky applesauce. And you can use it just as like almost like a molasses. I'm not sure how common this was. I have to talk to the lead of agriculture about this. During this period, they're not making maple syrup. I mean, first of all, when they boil maple syrup down, they're making maple sugar. They're going to boil it all the way down to a sugar. People generally don't like maple flavoring during the 1830s. Mostly it gets used. That won't come until the 1840s. You want to find people putting maple syrup onto their pancakes. Let's put it that way. They put molasses onto their pancakes.
Now we're out in the backyard. You can see their bathroom. This is the printing office. This lady was binding a book. This, of course, is the printing press. They made posters, books, sold books, bills and pamphlets. Here he is. Tell us about type.
Some of it was real big. Okay. Some of it was very, very small.
So if you want to write bigger, like 1,000 words, you write it small?
Yeah, it just would depend. That's real small. There were different sizes, different styles.
This is the typesetting rooms. Now let's go back and see the book binder.
Yes. What I'm trying to do here is just pull it as tight as I can. And just take this and pull it up around. Like this. And then just press down on it.
Thank you.
Now we're going to go over to the cider mill. You can see the apples all ready to go into the press. This is, they're making molasses. This is the press, the cider press.
It is a misnomer to call it a cider mill, but there isn't much better a name, so. Cider's made in your cellar from the juice that you press out in the mill. Most of it, no, you take it from that tub and put it into a cask and allow it to ferment. We're making some molasses outside, which is as inappropriate as making cider here, neither of which would be done because this is a mill that you're simply renting to press the juice out. Again, cider is made in your cellar. It takes several months to make cider. You're not going to tie up the mill for several months.
From here we went to an exhibit on glass products. It's very interesting, all different types of glass knobs. Lois was particularly interested in the candlesticks, for she'd seen a pair that was similar to what Grandpa James had bought after he arrived in the U.S. He sent them as a gift to his mother in England, and they were just like this amber pair. And she brought them back over here when she came to the U.S. They were dated 1848, and they were from Sandwich. Now this exhibit had not only guns, but also uniforms that they had worn during the skirmishes back then. One of the things that interested Lois and I was that so many uniforms were rather small and looked like the people were small, shorter than today. Now we're over at an exhibit showing how they spin wool into yarn.
Nothing compared to a factory machine. So you wouldn't find as many people spinning by hand in the 1830s as you would say in the 1730s, but still a fair number of people doing so. And this is a roll of wool that comes from the carding mill, from the carding machines. Carding just means that it's combed the fibers out and turn them over. And when you're spinning, you're twisting the loose fibers so that they're wrapping tightly around each other, and that makes it into a yarn. So the spinning is done by the spindle down here. All these gears, well, this is just the drive band, and the gears just make the spindle turn fast. In fact, not every spinning wheel has this gear on it. This is an extra little option that just speeds things up. You can draw the fibers out. I added on a little bit for you. That's all right. This is pretty nice wool. You know, it's pretty. Doesn't have too much. Maybe little puffy things in it. There's a few.
Now these, of course, are the looms, where they would take the thread and make it into cloth. And this now is over in an area where they made brooms. And by the way, you could buy these brooms there. They had quite a display of different type of brooms.
More than likely imported from the British Isles. Oh, that's what
It's going to retain.
Yeah, it's a different kind of design there at the top.
Oh, it's the exact same design.
They're all were made.
Well, the ones that we make here are principally of this design.
This building housed lighting devices. It had a very interesting display showing the chronology of lighting, starting from whale oil, and it went through gas, lard oil, kerosene, and then up to electricity in the late 1800s. Different devices used to produce light. This cute little building showed basket weaving. This was an herb garden. It had the various plants marked for their various uses, medical, etc., cooking, and of course those are hollyhocks. This is the clock gallery, which contained an extensive collection of New England handcrafted clocks. As impressive as the clocks were, there were two things that stood out to Lois and I. One is saying on a 3x5 card, which said early New Englanders thought of time primarily as an earthly period between birth and death to be lived in such a way as to reflect the glory of God in each individual. What a great saying. The second was an interpreter, who you'll see in a moment, explain a steeple clock, who told me he thought he would work but 4 more years. As you'll see, he's only 86 years young now. Here he is.
Where did you say the hands were?
The hands are on this gear right here, and you can see the cutout here for them.
Oh, yes.
And that's what motivates the strike up to 12. And this here, of course, is the area that you wind up. You crank this up, and this is what starts the clock. That weight there, of course, can go down probably 20 feet. It's going to be up in the steeple, of course.
How often did they have to wind
I
this?
think it's about every 24 hours.
24 hours.
Yeah. And then, of course, it works off this gear here, over here and across, and the hands of the clock are out here on either side, see?
Oh, yes.
And lots of people knew just when and what time to go to work or come home or whatever. So it served a good purpose in the community. It might be in a mill town or it might be in a church steeple.
Now to a storyteller.
The book was called Jonathan Draws a Long Pole. In other words, they were long stories, about walkers. And you just picture yourself as see the men sitting around the Cracker Barrel in the Ace and Night store, when it's to see who's going to tell the biggest story and so forth, and so forth. Well, this is some of the stories that we use. And this one is all about a frog and a snake. Well, it seems as though the family would have been having cow and smell and so forth, and they were getting rather tired of it. They thought they'd like to have a nice fish chowder. And, if you want fish chowder, you get a nice pickle. There's a lot of bones in it, but it makes a wonderful chowder. Put potatoes in and onions, and cream and so forth. Oh, I'm telling you, great. Well, anyway, the boy told his mother, he says, you're going to go out and get a pickle. She says, well, that's fine. We'll have it for tonight. So he takes his pole and he takes some pork rind, which was used for bait, and 2 or 3 fat worms. And he goes out to Miller's Pond, which is about a quarter of a mile away. And there at pond is all kinds of great big lily pads, you see. And that's where the pickerel like to be, because it's nice and dark in there. A lot of something to eat, and everything. So, anyway, he takes his pole, puts the pork rind on, and then he starts casting out, and pulling it back. And I did this for about 15 minutes, Of course, being a fisherman, you have to have a lot of patience. You're not going to catch fish every 2 minutes. So he's fishing around different places like that, But becoming a little bit discouraged now. For about 20 minutes, he hasn't had a strike at all. So he tries it again, and all of a sudden he sees this movement in the water. There's a little green frog just swimming across like that. Just about he gets over here, bang, great big pickerel comes on and swallows up that frog. Ha! He says, I got the wrong bait. So he goes over and says, I gotta get me a frog. Starts looking around and, on the edge of the pond where the long weeds are and everything. Maybe that's where you find the frogs. Not a frog in sight. So he goes over to the other side and starts looking around. Not a frog anywhere. Well, gracious sakes. What am I going to do now? Well, I'll try might play over and try it again anyway. So he tries setting it out here, setting it out there. Then he sees movement in the water. So he looks around, There's this great big black snake, it's got a frog in its mouth, coming right along to the land. Ah, he says, I gotta get that frog. So, I got the wrong bait. So he starts looking around and watching when she got over too close to the land. He grabbed a hold of that snake right at the back of the neck, and then he's holding it on. Of course, that snake is wiggling like a son of a gun, you see. And it's shaking and shaking and shaking. It's got that frog in his mouth. So he tries and tries and tries to pull that frog out, just as though it was up in a vice. Couldn't do a thing.
He's not over there.
Well, he's holding it on there, you know, and all of a sudden he says, I gotta do something about this. So he's thinking, you know. He reaches down and takes his little flask of New England rum, pulls out the cork, and slowly pours that down that snake's throat. Well, I'm telling you, that snake is wiggling around. You never saw anything like it. But he grabbed a hold of the frog and pulled it out. Goes the snake back into the water. Reaches over for his pole, puts the frog onto the hook. When he tries to get out there, you know, gee, he gets a strike. He says, I'm going to get that pickerel yet. So he's trying it out, you know, 2 or 3 times. Finally, he feels something.
Well, you know what he felt at his leg. It was that black snake with a frog in his mouth wanting more. Well, that completed our tour of the old Sturbridge village. And now we're in Stockbridge. And we're standing in front of the Norman Rockwell Museum. It contains original paintings by Norman Rockwell, including the 4 Freedoms and the triple self-portrait that we've all seen and admired. It's a beautiful town. This, of course, is a country store. Really quite interesting. This is the Red Lion Inn. It was built in 1773. And again, a view of the main street. Norman Rockwell did a painting of this main street at Christmas time. What a delightful painting, and it was there in the museum. Since it was lunchtime, Lois and I thought we would have lunch here in the Red Lion Inn, only to find that it would be about a 2-hour wait. Quite a popular place. So we headed on out to where we'd be staying the night over in Jericho Valley, which is in the northwest corner of Massachusetts, up at Williamstown. Very beautiful area. And it was interesting, though, that the proprietor told us that we should make an effort to be back at around 6 o'clock, that there would be a surprise then. So we took a scenic drive up the Mohawk Trail. Beautiful area. We were told that the leaves were not quite at their peak yet. It'd be several more days, pretty close to the weekend, when they would be at their peak. We went over to what's called Shelburne Falls. There's some interesting geological formations there, including a lot of potholes. They were formed several thousand years ago by the river there. Well, it was about time we head back to our place where we're staying to see what that surprise is. And look what the surprise is.
Oh, is that
Hello there.
on the street over there? Oh.
What a nice surprise.
How you doing?
Got you in all splendor. Yeah. He said,
Is this recording too?
yes, it is. We get it all.
We're getting the whole thing in.
And even
glad
on,
you follow instructions and got back by 6 o'clock.
that's exactly right. And I was trying to,
Spoil your time.
no, not at all. Listen, it's going to be recorded too.
It's going to be recorded.
We are, it's in the morning now. We had a great evening with the Sawyers, as always. And certainly is one of the highlights of our trip to have such a surprise. This is a delightful place to stay, so well run, and had just a neat time. Here, we're getting... Good morning, Ray.
Howdy. Howdy. We've eaten.
Hi,
The sun is shining, and away we go.
It was sure great seeing you guys and having
looks like it's
breakfast
going to
and
be a
dinner with you.
beautiful
Looks like
day.
you have a
Darlene was right. We did have a beautiful day, and we hope they did too. This is a pretty little church just down the road from where we were staying. From here we went on into Bennington, Vermont. And this is the old First Congregational Church, which is considered to be the most beautiful in New England. It was built between 1805 and 1806. It had vaulted ceilings of plaster and wood. This is the old burying ground adjacent to the church, and it contains the graves of the founders of Bennington, 5 Vermont governors, and the renowned poet Robert Frost. This is the Bennington Battle Monument, commemorating the Battle of Bennington, which was fought in 1777. It, when constructed in 1891, was the world's largest, tallest structure. It still is the tallest structure in Vermont. There's a tremendous view from the top, which you get there by an elevator. From there, we went to the Bennington Museum and seen an extensive paintings by Grandma Moses. And then, of course, this is a covered bridge. Notice, it's covered with all kinds of signs, too. There's somewhere in the neighborhood of 140 covered bridges in the state of Vermont. This is taken, of course, inside the covered bridge. Look at that construction. This is another bridge just down the road, and it's under reconstruction. Look at this sign, deaf person. They warn you. Well, here's another covered bridge. So we thought we'd drive through it. This covered bridge. This one's on Silk Road. We're a little shaky. We're trying the video through the window. And as you can see, we had some problems. Hello there. Not bad of sky and earth and bridge. Well, we're trying to get our act together here. Almost there.
Was it?
Almost got it. So with your patience, we'll try. We'll go through the bridge again. The other way. So, are you ready? Now we're going to go. Maybe. Here we go. Now this is, of course, Halloween time. And back on the East Coast, they really do it up great. Take a look at this pumpkin patch. We're now in the village of Manchester. And this magnificent church is in the center. This is one of the elm-bordered streets. Beautiful homes on each side. Now we're back on the main street. This is in Old Manchester, and look at those beautiful homes. It's a year-round resort. And there's Mount Equinox to the west. This is the famous Equinox Hotel. And now we're out in the country again. This is Vermont's Little Grand Canyon, the Keechee Gorge. It's a mile-long channel, 165 feet deep. And now, here's a place that I think typifies Vermont.
Hear the bird in the background?
This is now up near Killington. One of the little side roads. As you can see, it's ski country. This is where we stayed, the Inn of the Six Mountains. Had an indoor lap pool. This is a view from the balcony of our room. As you notice, it also has an outside pool. Just a gorgeous place. We spent 2 nights there. This is one of the sitting rooms. This is another view of the grounds. As you can see, there's a golf course right adjacent to the end of the Six Mountains. You see the slopes there in the background. It was interesting. The night before it had rained and there was a good windstorm. And we noticed that the top of the mountains didn't have the color they had when we first arrived. You can see the pumpkin on top of the car there. Another view of the slopes. The summit of the Killington Peak is over 4,000 feet. We spent the day touring the area, taking some back roads. Just beautiful country. We stopped occasionally when we seen an antique shop that looked interesting. Another covered bridge. I think we're getting better at going through these. We're on our way to Stowe, which is a skiing area. Hey, do you hear some music? Sounds like somebody's singing. You're right. That's the sound of music. Well, here we are at the Von Trapp Family Lodge. We were told that for 2 decades after the movie, the most frequent question in Stowe was how to get to the lodge. So eventually they even printed up a map with directions. This is the new lodge. The original one burned down in 1980. This now is in the gift shop. This says the birds and the bees, the flowers and the trees, maybe frogs, maybe bogs, maybe mud up to your knees. That's what they say if you want to go out and take a walk. The Baroness Maria von Trapp died in 1987. But many visitors still come up here to the Austrian tea room, and we had lunch there. And it was really good. Now we're on our way back into Stowe. We'll be staying here 2 nights. We're staying at the Old English Inn. This is the living room area. You have tea in the afternoon. And in the dining room for breakfast and dinner. Great food. And now we're going out into the country again. You guessed it, another covered bridge. Stowe is in the Green Mountains and offers a wide range of all your recreational activities. It's particularly noted for its winter sports. This is at Mount Mansfield, 4,393 feet. Actually, the top of that is covered with clouds that day. They have 44 slopes and trails. This is a drive that takes you through Smuggler's Notch. Legend has it that it was a smuggler's hideout in the passageway to Canada. As you'll see, there are very narrow paved roads, and it just picks its way around jutting boulders and through steep hairpins. And here, as you can see, you have to stop to let a descending car go by. You just hope you don't meet one or two. This is another covered bridge, a little different than the others. It's for trains. Still in use. This is the state capitol building, and now we're out to Granitesville to a granite quarry. The granite vein here is estimated to be 2 to 4 miles wide and the mind-boggling 8 to 10 miles deep. The deepest quarry is somewhere over 450 feet. There's an awful lot of waste because of imperfections. They say only 15% of the granite quarry is used. This shows some of the waste. This is one of the drills that they use. Drill a series of holes and then break off. This is in the museum, and you can see the way they use the granite, even to building a Mercedes. Now we were on a dirt road and we came to a floating bridge. As you can see, we're going to go right across the water, supported on a number of boards. See, that little boy's been playing in the water. And now we're on our way back to Stowe. This is in the village. That's the First Congregational Church. Some of the shops. This is the old schoolhouse. It's now a museum and library. And this, of course, is one of the finest eating establishments. I trust you got that sign. And now we're leaving Vermont for home. Now for an overview of our trip. We flew into Boston's Logan Airport, arrived around 5 p.m., and we spent the first night in Cohasset, Massachusetts. The next day, we headed out for Sturbridge. We stopped at Lexington, then took the Minuteman Trail to Concord, where we visited the museum. From there, we went on to Sturbridge, where we spent 2 nights. We visited the old Sturbridge village there. The next day, we got on the Massachusetts Turnpike, beautiful highway. Took about a 2-hour trip to Stockbridge, where we visited the Norman Rockwell Museum. We then went to Jericho Valley, which is near Williamstown, where we'd be spending the night. Since we had about 2 hours before we were to be back for a surprise, we took the Mohawk Trail to Sherburne Falls. And when we arrived, we were surprised to find the Sawyers there. Had dinner with them, and then the next day we went up to Bennington, Vermont, where there was an antique show going on, and we purchased this little 1879 New Haven striking clock. Let's hear it strike. From Bennington, we headed up to Killington, stopping at Arlington, Manchester, and we drove the back roads, took us through Chester and Ludlow. We spent 2 nights at Killington, which of course is the... We spent 1 day just wandering the back roads, went to Woodstock, down over to Rutland, stopping at various places that looked interesting, and back to Killington. The next day, we went from Killington over Highway 100, beautiful highway, up to Stowe, where we stayed 2 nights. From Stowe, we took Smuggler's Notch over to Belvedere Corners. And then we cut across some more back roads down to Montpelier, Capital, DeBar, down to Granitesville, and back up to Stowe. Then, on our last day, we cut across the state using highways 89 and 93 to Boston. And this completes our trip. Except one thing I wanted to show you. Look at the leaves, how beautiful they are. One last look. Gorgeous tree, gorgeous setting. And you know, by gosh, we're home. If you haven't already recognized it, this is our backyard. And it's the morning after we returned home. And it just proves that throughout our lives, God provides us beauty everywhere, if we'll only open our eyes and hearts to see it.